The book I've chosen is called Voyage of the Sparrowhawk. I don't have a physical copy. I read it on two-thirds of it on Kindle and a last third on Audible, and I much preferred reading it to listening to it. And it's about two children who go on a what seems like an impossible journey to find loved ones who are lost in France. It's set around the time of the First World War. Most of the action takes place in the aftermath of the First World War. So a major theme of the book is grief and loss, because a lot of the characters have lost loved ones. And the two main characters, firstly there's Ben, who's an orphan who's been adopted, but unfortunately his adopted father is killed while visiting his adopted brother in France, and his adopted brother is missing in action after the war. So basically this young boy Ben is on his own. He lives on a narrowboat and his only company is a dog called Elsie. And he makes friends with a girl called Lottie, whose parents died in a plane crash. So she's then looked after by her abusive auntie and uncle who don't want her around. They send her away to a boarding school where she's bullied, and she gets expelled from the school, and she's sent back home to the village where they live, and they don't want her around at all. And eventually she's at risk of being sent away to another boarding school and losing her own pet dog Federico. So she and Ben decide to go to France. Her plan is to find her grandmother, who she hasn't heard from since her parents died, and Ben's plan is to find his brother Sam. And the impossible part of the journey is not only because they're so young, but because they are doing undertaking the journey on a narrowboat. They meet a woman called Clara, who's for a time is their tutor, and she is grieving herself. She has a German fiance, so she was shunned by her family and friends because she was planning to marry a German who at the time they were the enemy. And she just wants to be left alone. She doesn't really want to be involved. She's very reluctantly dragged into this story by Ben and Lottie. And that's similar with the other adults they meet along the way. They meet two other narrowboat men called Frank and Jim, who don't want to be involved but get dragged along. So I touch on the theme of grief. Also another theme I would say is home and identity. So Nathan's found his home on this narrowboat. Lottie, her home no longer feels like a home because her auntie and uncle are there. So they're kind of searching for home and identity. Lottie kind of rebels against gender stereotypes. She rebels against the pretty dresses that her aunt puts her in. She cuts all her hair off so she's unrecognisable. She's quite a feisty, rebellious character. Bullying is a theme. She experiences bullying from her uncle and her auntie, and also when she's away at school and boarding school. Obviously grief and loss and freedom. I think the journey on the narrowboat represents freedom for them. And also the children being written off and underestimated by almost everyone, but despite that they still manage to come through. So it ties in with the theme of identity in PSHE and grief, and obviously that would need to be introduced sensitively. In terms of other subjects, it ties in with geography, obviously with the Channel crossing and the journey to France, history, when they'll be doing about World War I in Key Stage 4, and art, as Nathan, the adopted father, was an artist. So focus for the activities. So after the students or young people were comfortable with the text, I would suggest some reading, writing, and discussion activities. So that would cover the knowledge, skills and understanding aspects of the curriculum. So some questions for discussion could be how grief affects the behaviour of the characters. Group tasks on themes. So write an account of the crossing from Elsie the dog's perspective, or from Frank, who's the adult who helps them cross the channel. Write their own account of a time they found challenging or exciting. Write an account of a channel crossing from the perspective of modern day migrants. So this would come into modern day issues, PSHE, with the crisis in the English Channel at the moment. Class discussions: were the adults wrong to encourage Lottie and Ben? And also, how did Lottie and Ben's search help the adults that they came across come to terms with their own grief? So yeah, hopefully that's useful, and I recommend reading the book if you have time. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.